Ben, we're delighted to have you here at the high-level policy seminar on targeted killing and unmanned aerial vehicles organised by the Global Governance Programme of the EUI.
Thank you.
You've been very vocal in the last 6 months in making a number of statements concerning particularly the American practice of targeted killings using unmanned aerial vehicles. And you've announced most recently, quite dramatically, the composition of a team of investigators to look into the circumstances of some of these strikes. What motivated you to take that step?
Well, look, I think the principal question we're dealing with here is one of proliferation. The reality is that this is a technology that's here to stay, and that is, in military terms at least, has an unanswerable logic for the states that deploy it. And whilst the US is the market leader in the development of this technology as a counter-terrorism tactic for use on the sovereign territory of other states, the fact is that other states, apart from the United States, are already using it, including Israel and the United Kingdom, and many other states are in the process of acquiring the technology precisely because it is militarily an inevitability that the technology will lead the debate. The result is that international law has dropped the ball. We have a situation where there is no consensus between states or among international lawyers as to the fundamental legal framework governing when it is lawful to use this technology. And perhaps even more importantly, no framework or agreement as to the safeguards that need to be put in place, both in relation to appropriate legal targeting and in relation to the principles of distinction and proportionality. And all of that is underpinned by a complete absence of accountability, that's to say, transparency and independent investigation. And I think that the reality is that the United States and other states recognise that the time has arrived at which there has to be some measure of international agreement. We're facing, as I say, an exponential process of proliferation where this technology will be in the hands not only of states but almost certainly in the hands of non-state actors as well. And there now needs to be some real hard talking as to what the rules of engagement need to be. And one of the crucial questions is whether the existing legal frameworks are adequate to keep up with the technology. So that really is the immediate impetus, as well as, of course, the very real concerns that have been expressed around the world, in particular in those parts of the world where this technology is being deployed as a counter-terrorism tactic, about the extent of civilian deaths. We really do not know. That's one of the problems that accountability gives rise to. There is a huge margin of error in terms of the competing claims as to the extent of the accuracy or collateral damage that this technology involves. So this inquiry is aimed at getting some degree of light into the debate, rather than just the heat which has characterised polarised arguments up until now.
And so one of the things that would be perhaps put against you in the effort to shed more light on this practice is that by nature they are practices which rely on intelligence gathering, which is highly time sensitive and presumes not just secrecy but in fact a great deal of clandestine activity. To what extent can you meet those kinds of claims when insisting on some sort of procedure for review? Can the balance be met?
No, I think the balance obviously can be met, and we've seen, for example, that there are procedures in place for determining appropriate targeting and assessments of collateral damage after the event in Israel, but also undoubtedly in the United States and the United Kingdom. The problem is that, at least as regards the United States, there has not been sufficient public disclosure of what those systems are. And let me make one thing clear. I regard exaggerated claims of civilian casualties as being as much of a danger in terms of future radicalisation and the threat that is posed by terrorism and violent extremism as the technology itself. In other words, whilst there is a complete stonewalling as to the reality of what's happening on the ground and the systems that are in place critically for minimising error and civilian casualties and learning lessons when mistakes are made, whilst there is a stonewalling in the public discourse, the space is left wide open for for claims to be made that are unverifiable one way or the other, as to the reality of what's taking place, and that's a very dangerous situation. I mean, if you approach it as I do, the question of counter-terrorism from the proposition that it is the first and paramount duty of states to protect the lives of their citizens and those within their jurisdiction, and that is in itself a human rights obligation, you must at the same time recognise that the way in which that is done needs to ensure that it isn't counterproductive. And the danger, of course, of handing recruitment material or recruitment dynamics to those who would commit acts of terrorism and take the lives of innocent civilians by pursuing counter-terrorism strategies that don't conform with the rule of law is a very real one. And if you like, the main thrust of my mandate is bringing those two sides of the debate together. But what we've seen in drones and in relation to other issues in the counter-terrorism sphere is a tendency over the last decade to polarisation. To the human rights community taking the view that effectively they occupy a monopoly on human rights protection and are able, if you like, to distinguish themselves from the baddies in government, and those in government who regard the human rights community as not grappling with the very real human rights concerns that the government has to determine and has to protect. And my mission in my mandate is to try to bring those two sides into some sort of understanding of one another's position so that we can move forward. I actually think that this event that's taking place today is a critical moment in that process. It's a critical part of the process of bringing together policymakers from different parts of the world who are engaged either already in this technology or are likely to be encountering debates about its use in the very near future within their own states or states within their allies, with the academic and human rights community who have been looking at the IHL and IHRL issues. So I think this is the start of a conversation that critically needs to happen.
Ben Emmerson, Special Rapporteur on Counterterrorism, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Now.